I'm Langley Kirkwood, and I'm an actor. I have been an actor for 30 years, and with a bit of luck, I'll be doing it for another 30 to 40 if I get my way. My background is I was raised in Johannesburg. I grew up in a pretty normal suburban household in what was then apartheid South Africa. I grew up with parents who were involved in the arts. My father was a poet and a publisher and a lecturer in English, both at Durban University and then at Wits University in Johannesburg. And my mother was an art teacher, and she sold books. And we used to go to the theatre quite a lot. And between attending the theatre on a regular basis and watching Betamax films with my best friend down the road, I developed a love for drama. And it involved us, my best mate and I, basically reenacting the films that we watched in the backyard. And, a lot of imagination, just recreating and creating our own characters and our own stories, our own plays, which we would then have lots of fun just, messing about with in the backyard. And I suppose that developed into something more when I went to high school. In the early years of high school, I saw a production that changed my life. It was a Royal Shakespeare Company production of Othello with an all-South African cast, directed by Janet Suzman, with John Carney playing the role of Othello and an actor by the name of Richard Haynes playing the role of Iago. And I quite honestly went into the Market Theatre one person, and I came out of the Market Theatre a completely different person. And Richard Haynes's performance in particular had sparked and shifted something in me that I identified with so strongly that I knew that I was going to be an actor. That was it. And what was interesting is that I saw someone playing a villain in a way that I could fall in love with, and I don't know if it's been intentional or not, but I've spent most of the last 30 years playing darker characters. And I suppose, I got into it because I enjoyed it. And then sometimes what happens is you get typecast in certain roles because people can only see you. Once they've seen you doing something, they see you as the guy that can do that. I knew that I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't know how to get there. So fortunately for me, I went to a high school that was traditionally known as an all-boys rugby school, but it was one of the few schools in the country that offered drama as a high school subject, as a matric subject in those days, and had really good drama teachers. And I was able to act in school productions and elevate my craft to something beyond reenacting the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the life of Brian in the back garden. And when I finished high school, I auditioned for Wits Drama School, the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and essentially went to what Americans would call theatre school, and spent the better part of 4 years learning how to stage manage, how to light, how to do sound, how to be a general crew member, how to be a director of theatre, and primarily how to be an actor. Got out of Wits Drama School in the mid-90s. I actually dropped out in my final year because I was offered a role in a new play at the Market Theatre called Shooting Billy the Kid, being directed by an actor by the name of Lionel Newton, who had worked a lot in the world of physical theatre and was an exceptional physical theatre actor. He did a lot of work with Andrew Buckland. And I was offered the role of Billy the Kid in a production called Shooting Billy the Kid, and I jumped at it. I had to choose between dropping out of drama school and doing the production because the head of department at Wits wouldn't allow me to act professionally and stay in drama school. And it was there was some regret letting it go, but it was a decision that I believe was the right decision for my career. And that then launched me into working in theatre for a number of years, mostly in Johannesburg. But then I moved down to Cape Town to do a production of 12th Night down here in the late 90s. And I never left. I fell in love with Cape Town. I started working more then in film, firstly, and then in television. And when I started a family and needed to make some money, then I decided that I was going to pursue a career in television and film, and I suppose postpone my theatre dreams, which I did, and started working a lot in television. I worked for a year on a soap, which really cut my teeth. I was able to cut my teeth in terms of screen acting on that show, and it was a process of trial and error. I then started building up a resume and getting more and more work experience. It was a time when international film and TV productions were coming to South Africa on a bigger and bigger scale. And I was fortunate enough to get cast in a number of international film and TV projects. So I really started building my resume, and every now and then I was able to get back into the theatre, usually after a period of protracted work on screen. So I had some money in the bank, and I was able to go and work for theatre money, which, as any actor will tell you, is it's enough to pay your petrol bill, basically. And then I suppose, as often happens in any career, there's quite a lot of luck involved in being in the right place at the right time, and just being ready for when those opportunities come. And I had worked with a British director in 2008 on a BBC TV movie called Atlantis, which was a kind of essentially a disaster movie about based on the premise that the lost city of Atlantis was in fact the island of Thera, which was the name given then to Santorini Island, which was part of the Minoan civilization. And the premise was that there was an enormous volcanic eruption which launched a huge tidal wave which wiped out the entire Minoan civilization. So I'd worked on that film with him in 2008, and in 2012 I got a call from Tony Mitchell out of the blue to say, "Are you available? Can you ride a horse? And can you come to Morocco next week to play David in the Bible?" And it was a History Channel production of the Bible. It was their first scripted drama that they were doing, and it was quite a big deal. And I got to go to Morocco for 5 weeks and play David in the Bible, and had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and learned a lot about riding horses. I did know how to ride a horse when I said yes. I just became a much better rider when I was there. And then, as these things happen, a guy by the name of Greg Yatanis, who was a television director in the US, was flipping channels one day and saw me in the Bible, and contacted my agent out of the blue and said, "We'd love Langley to come and play the role of Colonel Douglas Stowe on our show, which is Banshee." And it was a little HBO show under the Cinemax label, and it was an kind of action show starring Anthony Starr as a small town sheriff, though with a twist, and that gave me the opportunity to go and work on a big show in the States for 5 months, which then led to me being able to get a green card and build other relationships and spend time working in the US. And as these things often happen, that relationship led to other relationships with the show's creator, a guy by the name of Jonathan Tropper. And Jonathan also contacted me one day and said, "I'm shooting a pilot for my new Kung Fu show in Cape Town, and there's a role that I had you in mind for. Do you want to audition for it?" And I had recently moved back to Cape Town to be near my kids, and I deferred the whole Hollywood dream. So it was. I felt like I was getting a good pat on the back here from God to say, well done for making the right choice, and here you go, I'm going to throw you a bone. And I auditioned for the role of Walter Buckley in a show called Warrior, which was based on the writings of Bruce Lee, and I got the part. And that led to about 7 years of the most incredible work on the most amazing television series I've ever worked on in my life. So, you know, that is more or less where I am today, just and interspersed with these kind of highlights. I've been lucky enough to have other projects in between, theater projects, film projects, TV projects, and do what not many people are able to do, which is to support myself as an actor. And I know how lucky I am and how lucky I've been to be able to do that. And it is a privilege. To talk a little bit about my process, I think I'll just, you know, what I always feel is important to impart with younger actors is that everyone needs to find their own process, because no two actors are the same. And no two humans are the same, and we are using our own humanity as our fundamental instrument, you know, as artists. You know, some people play guitar, some people play the drums or the piano. This is our instrument. It's all of it. It's the mental aspect, it's the emotional aspect, and it's the physical aspect. So find your own process, whatever that is. Honestly, there are no rules to this thing. Whatever works best for you is your process. So don't let anyone else tell you what the right way or the wrong way is of doing this, because there isn't any such thing. But there are some fucking good ways, and there's some really good teachers out there, and people who can be studied and whose processes can be studied to find tools and ways of working in film and television primarily, that'll stand you in good stead. My own process, I think I'll take you through my audition process, and you know, because this is pretty much what I apply to when I'm working on a job as well. And it's, you know, the three, you know, I suppose pillars of it are the text, and then your own emotional world, your own world as a human, and what you can bring to the character, and then creating the world and the life of the character. So investigate the script as much as you can. You know, sometimes you get 24 hours to audition for something, and it's not a lot of time, and they don't send you the script, but they'll send you sides. And sometimes you get a week or 2 weeks to prepare for an audition, and they'll send you a full character breakdown, like character Bible, and they'll send you the full script. And so, first of all, you're an investigator. That's one of your jobs as an actor. You've got to investigate the script as much as you possibly can. Get as much information as you can out of that. And then once you've got as many facts about your character and all the characters you're interacting with, you use your own imagination and you play and you create. And you create a backstory. You know, shape this person's internal world and their history, where they've come from, what they've done in their life leading up to this moment. So also the what's happened just before the scene that you're going to be auditioning for, the scene that you're going to be doing in the audition. You know, coming in with that pre-beat is very important. Coming in with the energy of where that character's just been the moment before they walk into the scene, so that when the scene starts, you know exactly what is dictating that first line, what emotional state is dictating that first line. And then there are the more obvious and well-taught and well-known things, like, you know, your overall objective for your character. What is your character's lifelong objective? If you want to be a farmer, you want to raise a happy family and go live in the countryside and, you know, raise chickens. That's your overall objective. And then, you know, that will influence and talk to your character's objective then in the scene, because that is the next most important, like what your character wants to achieve and get out of the scene, which then in turn dictates the beats that you can break the scene up into, which I do. And each beat has got to have an intention behind it, bearing that overall scene objective in mind. So you will, what is a great way to do it, I find, is to choose 3 actionable verbs, like different ways in which you can play each beat, and play with 3 of them, so that when the audition comes, you've got 3 different ways of playing the scene and playing each beat in the scene, because you might get feedback from the director or the casting director. The director might have a vision for the scene that is different from yours. So explore those different possibilities and really have fun with it. Use your imagination and don't just stick with what feels logical and safe. Sometimes throw in a choice there that is completely outrageous and wacky, because that very often will be what a director or a casting director sees and goes, wow, that's really interesting. I haven't seen anyone, make that choice before. And then, then there are ways of coloring the scene. When you put those beats together, and you obviously need to read the scene and become really familiar with it. Let the lines live in you, so you're not fighting for them or thinking about the lines, that they are just coming. But there are other things that you need to color the scene with, and one of those has got to be an internal monologue. Like, what is your character thinking, but not showing the whole way through the scene, underneath the words? What is going on inside that character? And quite importantly, I find, is what is the secret that this guy or this character, this man or woman is holding and hiding? Their secret life. That adds so much texture and color to a scene. So that's really important. And then, ways, the physical life of the character. Is there something in the audition that you can be doing, a physical activity which can sometimes lend itself to the dialogue and is somehow relevant? And sometimes is it something that can add tension to what the character is doing? If the character is interrogating someone, or perhaps about to kill someone, it might be interesting if the character's, a couple of needles and is knitting, or doing some embroidery or something that goes completely against the writing and against what you would expect. And then, very importantly, is what I do is substitute. I substitute real relationships in my life for the relationships in the scene. And that is a very important part as well, relationships, because if you're doing a scene with, say, 2 or 3 different characters, your relationship with each one of those characters is going to be fundamentally different. And so is the energy of those relationships going to be fundamentally different. If I know that I've got 3 kids, I know that my relationship with each one of those kids is different, and my energy when I'm talking to each one of them is completely different. So the audience need to see that as well, because that just, it keeps it in a natural, believable state of reality. So substituting real people for the characters in the scene often helps. And with that, you can also imagine and think of real events that have happened in your life. For instance, with those characters that you are substituting. So if there was something in your life like a betrayal that you remember that was relevant to a character like the character in the scene, use that. Sensory memory is such an important part as well. And the other thing is place, the place that the scene is taking place in. Use your sensory memory to create the reality of the place that the scene is taking place in. So the smells, the sounds, like an Italian restaurant, for instance, is very different to, say, a bronze foundry in terms of how it's going to sound, in terms of how it's going to smell, the noises, and how it's going to look. And if you're preparing an audition that takes place in a very specific scene, make a map in your mind even of the layout in the room, of what it's going to look like and what it looks like. So if you need to move around in the scene, you know exactly where you're going and what you're doing. And yeah, I guess it's really about using your imagination and playing, but playing very fucking seriously. And then you build this life and this world for the character that you create. And then the last thing that you need to do is trust yourself, and then just let it go. Like, honestly, do all that work. Spend however many days or hours you have to prepare the shit out of it, and then let it go and just trust it and play and find moments that take you by surprise, and stay open. So if you do get taken by surprise by something another actor in the scene or the casting director you're reading with, something they give you, you use that and you react to it, and you don't stay kind of shut off and in a very closed way of doing things. Because very often those little moments, those happy mistakes, will stand out as the most real moment in the scene. That is my 5 cents worth in terms of my process. And in terms of my advice for anyone who wants to become an actor, it's like a calling. It is a calling, I would say, because it's a hard life. The life of any artist is not an easy life, and you have to have quite a thick skin, and you have to be able to not take things personally, because there is a lot of rejection involved, and it's not about you. It's just simply a matter of it not being the right place, the right time, or the right character. So if you do feel called to be an actor, then fucking do it. Jump in, and give it everything, because it is the most incredible journey of self-discovery you could ever experience. My other advice would be to look after yourself, because, as I've said, this is your instrument. You need it to be in top running condition. You need it to last a long time. You want to look after your voice, because that is a primary part of your instrument. Look after your physical health, so that you can be ready to run around the block chasing someone 30, 40 times in a day if you have to, or be able to, jump off a horse or a bicycle, or go swim in the ocean and do stuff, live. Find amazing, interesting hobbies, because those also add to your skill set, Go and take up a martial art, learn how to paint, do it. But, it doesn't matter if you do it badly, just do it. Because those are all tools that you can keep in your toolbox.